Hey guys, my name is James Walsh, and you are listening to the Wrestling Epicenter here on YouTube. I want to thank you for finding us. Please do me a favor and click that subscribe button and the notifications bell. And if you get the chance on this video, click the like button. If you do, it'll turn blue. Check it out. Also, check out WrestlingEpicenter.com for all this great content available in MP3 format, our online store that'll keep us going free and clear, daily news updates, as well as all the information from the history of professional wrestling you could possibly ever want. Check out WrestlingEpicenter.com online right now. Without any delay, let's get to your interview here on the Wrestling Epicenter.
Founder of CHIKARA Pro, Mike Quackenbush. Mike, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing quite well. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm glad to be here at 3 Count Wrestling.
We're honored, like I said, we're honored to have you. Before we get into the CHIKARA questions, a little background information. We don't like to ask the question, were you a wrestling fan growing up? Because the answer is almost always the same. But what was it about wrestling that held your fascination as a kid?
Growing up, I wasn't much of a wrestling fan. Primarily where I'm at here in southeast Pennsylvania, the NWA really didn't have much television until WCW came along. So all we really got here was WWF. And I found it fairly uninteresting. In fact, because the first thing I'd ever seen of wrestling was that old CBS Rock and Wrestling cartoon, I thought that was what pro wrestling was. I thought it was animated. Not that what the WWF was putting out at the time was that far removed. And Rock and Wrestling was certainly the more entertaining of the two. But when I did start watching, I think I was most intrigued by Jake the Snake Roberts at a young age, because there was something about the way that he spoke, and he certainly had ample interview time on their television programs. There was something about the way that he spoke. It really seemed as if there was something genuine about him. Like, I believed what he said, whereas, like, the over-the-top rantings of, like, Randy Savage or the Ultimate Warrior, like, it seemed like a put-on to me. Even as a kid, it seemed, just ridiculous and absurd. Like, no one talks like that. And I think Jake, in particular, had, like, that kind of quiet charisma to him and a certain magnetism that kind of, I was always locked to the screen when he was on. Even though at a young age, like I said, I really wasn't much of a regular viewer at all. But I found him most intriguing as a kid.
But what made you decide you wanted to try it as a career? What was that epiphany moment?
I think the moment that really kind of changed that for me was maybe like late 1990, I want to say, when we did get WCW on television here. They had broadcast on free TV a match between Brian Pillman and Jushin Liger. And I think part of it was that these guys were smaller than the average wrestler. Some of the guys on WWF were like these freaks, these giants, whereas Pillman and Liger were smaller guys, average-sized guys. Not that they didn't have their own star qualities to them, but they seemed in that way to be more like me, like a regular person. And the fact that the match that those two put on was certainly cutting edge for the time, but it was far and away the most spectacular thing I'd ever seen on a wrestling program. I thought, wow, I could do this. I could be one of these guys. If these guys can do it, why can't I? And that was really like a big turning point for me, from just going to being kind of like intrigued by some of the characters to really feeling like, wow, I think I could pursue this in earnest.
So when did you start training?
Oh, well, I had such a backwards method of arriving on the wrestling scene that I actually started training long after I was wrestling, which I can tell you from firsthand experience is a really backwards way to go about starting your career. I was wrestling as early as 1991, but the first time I ever sat in a training class was in 1995. It sort of became evident to me after having something of a go-nowhere fumbling career for several years that I'd better go out and have somebody teach me what they know, because, it was very little that you can manage to ascertain on your own without the assistance of a good trainer. Unfortunately, I was idiotic enough to try for several years on end to get by with next to no knowledge before I actually managed to get some training during the time when I lived in Pittsburgh. I was going to college out there.
Wow. one of our former guests, Ivory, has a thing about you should get your college education. Do you have a degree, or is wrestling your career?
Well, wrestling, I think, has inadvertently become my career. Not that it necessarily always pays the bills, but it was to pursue wrestling more full time that I ended up leaving college after just 2 years, or at least as a result of my wrestling pastimes. The college saw fit to toss me out. But by the second year that I was out there in Pittsburgh, I was spending so much more time traveling and doing independent stuff and concentrating on wrestling. I was spending virtually no time whatsoever concentrating on getting my degree. So the end result is, wow, I've sure had a lot of matches, but I can't say I've got a college degree.
Okay. Well, for those of our fans who like to live the dream, what was it like to wrestle for the first time in front of a crowd for you?
The first time I really wrestled in front of a crowd of any decent size, I was fortunate enough on May 20th, 1994 to wrestle in my own high school gymnasium when I was a senior in high school there. So to have, 1,100 of my peers collected together for really the sole purpose of watching me make a fool of myself, which thankfully I narrowly avoided, that was really something incredible. It's a different experience, I think, when you walk into any other type of arena and it's filled with strangers who, at that moment, from the moment they see you, just immediately decide they're either going to cheer or boo you or whatever it is they want to do. Whereas I had like a very rich experience because everywhere I turned were, my classmates and my peers and people that I knew surrounding the ring. And it was really just both an incredible rush and an experience like no other, especially for someone like me who was never particularly popular in high school. For those 9 minutes or whatever it might have been that I was in the ring, to have their full attention and to hear them, going crazy and cheering me on while I was doing what I was doing was just an exceptional moment, not just in my wrestling career, but in my life. It really, at that point, I think indicated strongly to me, like, wow, this is something that I would like to do for as long as I possibly can. This is something I'm genuinely interested in. It's not just a pastime or a passing fancy that I have. Like, I think there are a lot of people who train sometimes because they just want to step into the ring once. They want to see what it's like, and then that's it for them. They have no career aspirations so much as they want to satisfy their own curiosity. And I think from that moment forward, it was less about satisfying my curiosity and more about, can I really have a go at this? Can I make anything of this?
Well, if we could, I don't mean to be insulting, but you have a pretty long career, and I don't want to actually, go through it in detail. But if we could talk about some of your friends and opponents in your career. One in particular is someone you actually co-train at the CHIKARA Wrestling Factory, Chris Hero. What were your early matches like together, and how have you evolved with him as a wrestling partner?
Well, Chris and I had really only wrestled a couple of times early on, like before he had moved out here full time to help at CHIKARA Wrestle Factory, and the early matches we had, I think, they're very clean, very technical matches, and I think we like to kind of test each other. Chris and I have studied a lot of the same styles. So it's sort of like this friendly game of one-upmanship, like, oh, look what I know, what do you know? It sort of had that theme to it. Then I think in the wake of last year's Tag World Grand Prix, which is this obese tag team tournament that CHIKARA has staged a few times in the past, there's more intensity to our matches now. We're more out there. We kind of want to pound each other in the face a little bit more, and I think the desire for Chris and I to go out and have a clean technical match has long been satisfied. I think the people that want to see that, they got plenty of that in the past.
And another, I guess, early opponent of yours would be Reckless Youth. I guess how has your relationship with him evolved and such?
Reckless and I started out as opponents. We were opponents for one another quite regularly in a lot of independents throughout the United States. I think because we were so similar in size, and we sort of had, I think what many people might think of as being a very 90s independent high flyer style. It was when the influence of Japanese tape trading and that type of stuff really started to influence the independents. But eventually our relationship sort of evolved from that because we ended up being opponents for one another so often and traveling to the same buildings together. We just ended up as partners. And we sort of became tag partners that way. And of course, Reckless had co-founded Chikara with me, and we were tag team partners as well in Chikara. So that was sort of one, I think, where our mutual appreciation for each other's talents as opponents sort of curtailed itself right into a tag team partnership, which is kind of unique. I don't think that happens all that often anymore.
Well, before we get into the bones about Shikara and the Wrestling Factory, you wrote a couple of books. Why don't you explain Fantastic Finishers and Headquarters and I believe Secret Identity?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fantastic Finishers was a magazine-style book that came out in the summer of 1998, really when, like, the Steve Austin era boom had hit full on, and I was approached by the people who put out Pro Wrestling Illustrated to help write about some of the more popular finishing moves at the time, mostly because I was lucky enough that they were going to feature one of my own moves. And that came out through the newsstands. That wasn't available, like, at a traditional bookstore unless they carried wrestling magazines. And that did real well, and it kind of convinced me at that point that this impossible idea of writing a book, which sounded like such an incredible, feat of, all the time you'd have to invest and everything else, it seemed quite realistic. And so in September of 2001, I had put out sort of a memoir, an autobiographical tale called Headquarters, which sort of charted the way that my regular life and my wrestling life always end up screwing each other up, etc., and sort of followed my career up until I was about the age 24, 25. That also did surprisingly well for a book that really came out with no publishing company behind it. And I published a companion piece for it a couple of years later called Secret Identity, which, lucky for me, just come back into stock. So if you're looking to pick these up, fans, don't worry, because some of those which have long been sold out are once again available through my website, or wherever else, I guess, you go about picking those type of things up, eBay or in a trash can behind a wrestling event. Wherever you might find my books, they're back in stock.
Awesome. Well, if we could, let's move on to the Shikara Wrestle Factory. What separates that school from other schools, I guess?
I think the thing that we take the greatest deal of pride in is offering a type of curriculum that no other school in the U.S. does. We really emphasize the variety of the styles that we teach our kids. You're not going to come to Chikara Wrestle Factory and just learn one style. You won't just learn, 80s WWF American style. You're not just going to learn Mexican Lucha Libre. You're not going to just learn, that retro 70s British Lancashire style. We're going to teach you everything. And we've always been very fortunate to have a number of guest trainers as well as the regular training staff. Myself, Chris Hero is a regular trainer there, Skyda from the Torreon in Mexico. We've just been so lucky that we kind of have this melting pot going on at Chikara of the various wrestling styles, and I think that sets us apart.
And could you give us some of your more well-known students?
Sure. I mean, I guess it depends where you're at and who you might have seen. A lot of my guys just now are starting to travel the independents very heavily. If you follow Northeast Independents, you've probably heard of some of my students like Eddie Kingston, the current CZW heavyweight champion. The CZW junior heavyweight champion right now, Jigsaw, is also one of my students. Some of my guys travel more towards the Midwest now. For example, a guy named Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney certainly gets out into the Midwest a whole lot. A guy who I know both Chris and I are very proud to see the way his career has taken off is Claudio Castagnoli, a guy who relocated from Switzerland to the U.S. to train with us. So really, I guess it just kind of depends where you're at, who you might have seen of our students. And that's not to say that some of the other guys aren't up and coming as well, but I think right now those guys are kind of the ones making headlines at the moment that if you're following independent wrestling, you may have heard of.
Okay. Pardon me for delaying here. It's a little early for me.
No problem.
All right. I just lost a bit. I guess. How long would you prefer to train a wrestler, or How long do you actually train a wrestler until you think he's ready for his first match?
Well, everybody's a bit different. We've had people pass through the program as quickly as 3 months. A wrestler of ours, Grant Akuma, holds the distinction of passing through the program quickest of all, from first day to his debut in the ring. And we've had some guys now who are coming close to have been training with us for 2 years. It's really an individual thing. A lot of it is dependent on the natural coordination and athletic ability of the individual. When the guys come to CHIKARA Wrestle Factory, when they sign on with us, they sign on with us for the whole 9 yards. It's not like we say to them, well, if you're not ready in 6 months, we'll see you later, or you've got to pay again, or, go somewhere else. We take a great deal of pride in the commitment we make to each student to see them through the program from start to finish. And whether it takes 3 months or it takes 2 years, it's really just kind of up to the individual. And there are those of us too, some of my very best guys, like I could mention Wicked by name. We sort of feel like, your training never ends. I'm still going down to training twice a week. I'm there, not just because I have to be, but because I train out of habit. And I think that's the trademark of a good wrestler, is one that never really stops training.
And is it just a wrestling school, or do you train like your own referees and stuff?
Mm-hmm. We train referees, and actually, although we've never had anybody come through just for this reason, we also train managers and valets. But I think that's sort of I think that's sort of lost some of its luster over the years. Especially now that people of really any size could be a professional wrestler. Most people aren't content just to stand there at ringside and, whatever they do. They really want to get in and try it themselves. So we train every type of career you could look for in professional wrestling. We offer some kind of training for that at the Wrestle Factory.
Okay. Well, in addition to the Wrestle Factory, you also have Shikara Pro. First question, as the promoter, is it difficult to not put yourself over?
Luckily, for a great example of that would be like our Young Lions Cup. There are a lot of things on our annual calendar that aren't really even suited for someone like me. I just turned 30, whereas the Young Lions Cup is specifically designed for wrestlers age 25 and younger. So I think all the people that work behind the scenes, we've really done a good job of kind of creating a structure where, by the nature of what our annual calendar looks like, it would be difficult to constantly feature the same person, even if that was our intent. If our goal was to just go out and say, we're going to basically have one star here and everyone else is going to be supporting cast, so to speak. The calendar that we maintain really doesn't lend itself to that. From whether it's a tag team tournament, which obviously features duos, to Young Lions Cup, which features rookies, to our Cybernetica, which is coming up on October 28th, which is 2 teams of 8 wrestlers together in an elimination match, I should say. My tongue gets tied up. We sort of have forced ourselves to diversify in that way so that you couldn't just go out there and, constantly feature the same person over and over.
Okay. All right. Here's another question from one of our fans. You're an American. The promotion has a Japanese name, and the titles are in Spanish. To quote the person who gave me the question, what gives?
What was that? I'm sorry.
My apologies. I guess he wants to know why the eclectic nature of the promotion. You're an American. The promotion is a Japanese word for power, I believe, and
that's right.
And the titles are in Spanish. Why?
Well, I think originally when we put everything together, we had hoped that our audience would have sort of immediate appreciation for the fact that we tried to blend together an American style, a Japanese style, a Mexican style, and a bit of a European style as well. And we kind of felt like the best way to do that is right out of the gate, whether it's we're going to have wrestlers that have foreign names, or I should say sometimes non-English names, to the titles of the shows, to the titles of the company. We sort of want to wear our variety on our sleeve. And it was certainly never we were never intending to confuse the audience, so much as I think we really wanted to kind of showcase up front that this is not going to be just another American indie company. Like, I think that's the last type of generalization that we would want to have levied against us. This is just another run-of-the-mill independent. So in all the little details of the way Chikara is put together. We really try to put it out there strong and in front that we're something different, and we've got a very eclectic, very international flavor to us. And it's evident not just in the name of the company, as your reader had pointed out, but in the titles of the shows, etc.
Okay. Okay, this one's a little difficult to ask because apparently English is not this person's first language, but you have one of your big events is the Tag World Grand Prix, which features, I'm assuming, a lot more tag teams than most companies even consider. I guess the question is, what possesses you to sponsor, I guess, such a large field of tag teams?
Not all that long ago, I had sat down with some of my independent friends, and we were sort of talking about how we felt tag team wrestling was becoming a lost art in the United States. And we're certainly not the only people to think this. I think if you troll around on enough message boards and that type of thing, you might find other people echoing similar sentiments. And we kind of put it to the variety of people that work behind the scenes at Chikara. What can we do that will really, I think, impress people with tag team wrestling? What kind of event could we put on that will sort of cast tag team wrestling in a new spotlight? And we were fans of the old NWA Crockett Cups, which were large 24-team tournaments that were held, I think, in the late 80s. Maybe there was one in the early 90s. But these were just fabulous showcases of tag teams from around the world and from other companies and other promotions and things like that. And we sort of lamented the loss of the Crockett Cup, which we thought was a very unique concept. And we weren't really content to just go and reiterate the Crockett Cup on an independent level. We thought, let's really do something that takes this as far as we could possibly take this. And to that end, we came up with the Tag World Grand Prix, which is 32 teams, and to the best of anyone's knowledge, is probably the biggest tag team tournament of any kind. And we felt like this is really something unique that not only will help, I think raise awareness of the company, but we can bring in tag teams from around the world, tag teams from other companies, and really show people the strength of tag team wrestling and maybe counteract in some ways this growing philosophy that tag team wrestling is dying, because we certainly didn't feel that way, and we didn't want people to feel that way either. And the end result really kind of became, for us, an event that put us on the map, and I think drew a lot of first-time fans to see what is this bizarre little company we've never heard of doing, putting on a 32-team tag tournament. No, that was really the whole idea behind it.
Are the logistics of having so many tag teams in a one big event a problem?
When we still did the Tag World, we've since removed it from our annual calendar after crowning tag team champions. When we were putting on the 32-team version, it was a logistical nightmare, to say the least. Not just for me, but for the entire Chikara staff, and everybody that works behind the scenes to make these events possible. Whether you're talking about just trying to find people that can communicate in a common language when we have visitors from other countries, to how we're going to arrange to pick up 41 people at the airport. I don't know anyone that's got a car that big. To, where are we going to put all these people and get the right people for the right events on certain nights? And it really was. It was a good experiment in that regard, and I think we all learned a lot from having to stage an event of that size. But yes, it was with considerable hardship that the logistics of the tag world were addressed. It was certainly a much bigger undertaking. When we're sitting around the table saying, let's put on the biggest tag team tournament ever, everyone's saying, yeah, that's great. It's something else when we're all getting up at 3:30 in the morning to start shuttling in the people flying in from Japan, and we're thinking, why did we want to do this?
I guess another aspect of Chikara that makes you guys unique is not only the influences from Japan and Mexico, but just the overall fun nature of the promotion. Is that something intentional, or is that just something that comes out of you and the rest of your cohorts?
I think it certainly was an intent of ours from the beginning, even if we didn't know quite how to go about doing it. But we felt like we wanted to put on shows that would draw kids as an audience. I know at the time that Chikara formed, Reckless and I in particular had grown a little bit jaded by the constant criticism that we felt was inherent in a lot of the, or was forthcoming from the wrestling audience that had slowly stopped being fans and had started becoming critics. They were sort of, I think, in the wake of the popularity of the internet, anyone that wants to write a review fancies themselves some type of critic or journalist. And we kind of grown tired of that, and we felt like maybe the best way to circumvent this would be to put on a show that really is most attractive to kids. And which is not to say that we were trying to exclude any audience, but we felt like this might be more fun because we didn't want to go out there and feel like we were constantly under the microscope or we were constantly going to be the victims of criticism. And so we thought, what can we do that will attract kids? And to that end, we sort of ended up with a more, I think, fun-loving kind of show as a result of trying to gear it that way. But at no point did we decide, we don't want adults to be able to appreciate this, or we want to exclude teenagers or anything like that. So we kind of put a little bit of everything into the show, and I think that's the experience most folks have when they come to see us. There's a little something for everybody, and you might find some of it to be comical, maybe you don't, or you might find some of it to be wildly entertaining, and other people do not. But I'd like to think that everybody that comes leaves having seen something that was at least specifically tailored to them.
All right. Well, in addition to the innovations of the CHIKARA promotion, you also have a pretty wide following on the internet with your CHIKARA Podcast, A Go-Go. What inspired that? We're really lucky in that people have gotten on board with the podcast, which I guess started back in March. We started doing it, and I'm glad that people are tuning in. If you haven't had a chance to check us out, please drop by iTunes or YouTube and just search for CHIKARA Podcast, and you'll find it comes out every Monday, usually somewhere around 9-10 minutes in length. And I think it's really been a fantastic way for us to find a new audience and for a new audience to find us. And we've really just been overwhelmed with the positive response we've gotten from around the world. Like, I'm always amazed when somebody will write, I'm from the Czech Republic and I just got into CHIKARA because I've been watching your podcast. That type of thing is amazing to me. And I'm so glad that we managed to realize it pretty much the way we wanted. A lot of times at the independent level, you have these big aspirations, but you have no money or no means to realize it the way you want, and it kind of comes out half-baked. And I don't think that's been the case with the podcast, thanks in large part to the guy who usually co-hosts it with me, a man named Wiggly, who's just technologically savvy and very creative and pours a lot of his own energy and enthusiasm into the project. And for those of you that have watched, I'm sure you can tell, we have a great deal of fun doing it, and I'm really pleased it's been so well received. All right. Well, you have before we get into the word association, you have a show coming up the 28th, I believe, of October?
Mm-hmm. That's right. October 28th, we'll be back at the former ECW Arena. Nowadays, they like us to call it the New Alhambra, but everybody kind of knows it as the ECW Arena. We'll be down that way on October 28th for our annual Torneo Cibernetico.
I believe it's a team headed by Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney. We've interviewed him, and he's a wonderful person to talk to, versus a team headed by Eddie Kingston. Want to give us any hints on who the other?
Well, it's funny you should mention, because I had just gotten off the phone with, and I don't know how quickly this interview may air, but I can tell you I had just gotten off the phone that later today some of the teams are going to be revealed. So today is Tuesday, October, the 10th, something like that, maybe the 11th. But I actually just got word that they're going to start rolling out exactly who is on Larry Sweeney's squad a little bit later today, because it's been finalized. So I'm very curious to see. I have my own suspicions about that, but I know if you are curious to see, as the teams are revealed, the 2 squads of 8, you won't have to wait very long. In fact, maybe by the time you've listened to this, some of Larry Sweeney's team will begin to be revealed. And apparently by Friday, the entire team will be announced. So I don't think we'll have to wait very long to find out.
Okay. Awesome. And if we could finish with a few word associations. Basically, if you have a one-word story, let me try it again. If you only want to give a one-word answer, that's fine. But if you have a story, feel free to share.
Okay.
Okay. First name on the list is Claudio Castagnoli.
Future superstar, I think.
Mm. How about your one of your training, partners, Chris Hero?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
You don't have to limit. If you want to, you can talk as much as you want about him. So,
virtually unlimited potential. I think that's probably the best. That's the safest thing to say.
How about one of your students, Eddie Kingston?
I think with Eddie, you've only begun to see the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of layers to this guy that he's just beginning to show.
And another one of your students, his opponent at Torneo Cibernetico, Larry Sweeney.
Ridiculously entertaining.
How about another one of your former students and a former guest of our show, Bryce Remsburg?
Quite possibly the hardest working referee active today, I think, and a guy who gets far too little credit for the job he does. So, yeah, that's more than that, just a handful of words there, but can't say enough good things about Bryce, who's really, I think, developed into one of the very finest officials working.
And probably the craziest guy I've ever had the chance of sending an email to, Delirious.
Yeah. To try and sum him up in one word almost doesn't do him justice, which I'm sure you know if you've spoken to him.
Mm-hmm.
Unique. I think that might be a safe way to go about it. Unique. There's no one quite like Delirious.
Alrighty. Once again, thank you. Sorry, I just got IM'd a question. If you don't mind me asking one final question before we let you go.
Sure.
This guy seems to know you quite well. You've created some pretty unique finishers. Do you mind that other wrestlers sometimes borrow them?
I think years ago that used to kind of get my goat a little bit. You know, I kind of felt like that was my property or something like that, and I don't really feel that way anymore. Now I've sort of taken on the philosophy that that's really the sincerest form of flattery to see someone imitate what I do, and as much as it used to bug me, it really doesn't bug me much anymore, I guess.
Alrighty, once again, we really can't thank you enough. This has been a pleasure for me to be able to sit here and talk with you for this half hour. If you'd like to plug anything else, the floor is yours, sir.
Wow. Well, I think we did a pretty good job of getting the plugs in, didn't we? We talked about October 28th when Chikara's back at the ECW Arena. I all but begged your audience to subscribe to Chikara's podcast to go. You won't regret it. Or if you do, send nasty email to Wiggly. Don't send it to me. And what else do we have going on? Please pick up my books, especially now that Secret Identity, which has been out of stock for quite a while, is back in stock. You can drop by MikeQuackenbush.com. You can direct your personal hate mail to me there and buy up all my various sundries. And thanks for listening. I'm glad people even care what I have to say. So thanks so much for paying attention to my endless ramble this past half hour.
All right. And once again, thank you very much. This has been quite an honor for us. And you have a good day, sir.
Thank you very much. So long now.
So long. All right.
Hey guys, my name is James Walsh, and you are listening to the Wrestling Epicenter here on YouTube. I want to thank you for finding us. Please do me a favor and click that subscribe button and the notifications bell. And if you get the chance on this video, click the like button. If you do, it'll turn blue. Check it out. Also, check out WrestlingEpicenter.com for all this great content available in MP3 format, our online store that'll keep us going free and clear, daily news updates, as well as all the information from the history of professional wrestling you could possibly ever want. Check out WrestlingEpicenter.com online right now. Without any delay, let's get to your interview here on the Wrestling Epicenter.